Greetings and salutations. In some of my previous videos that I linked in the description below, I demonstrated how to search for emails in an inbox of a certain criteria, download associated attachments, and move the email into a different folder in the mailbox. I showed how to accomplish this using Python and PowerShell. In today's video, I will show you how to accomplish this using Power Automate desktop version. Now there is probably a less convoluted way to do this, especially with Power Automate Cloud version, but I will demonstrate how I accomplish this using the free version. Follow along with me and let's begin. If you are not familiar with Power Automate, it is a service offered by Microsoft that helps you create automated workflows between applications and services that can sync files, get notifications, collect data, and much more. The Power Automate Desktop is a free version of the service and installed by default on Windows 11. If you don't have it, you can download it by visiting the link in the description. Once installed, you can launch it like any other application. This is how the home screen will look. If you click on the plus new flow button, we can begin creating the flow. So we can go ahead and give this flow a name. I will give it the name of Get Attachments and select Create. It takes a few moments to create our flow area. And here we are. On the left will be all our actions that we can perform. In the center will be our table where we construct our flows. And on the right will be our variables. Now our goal is to read emails in our inbox that have a subject of daily report and download their attachments to a specific folder. So these emails will be targeted and their attachments downloaded to a folder that identifies the sender. So we will download each attachment into a subfolder that is the sender's email address. Once the attachments has been downloaded, then we want to file the email into this completed subfolder. Our mailbox is using Outlook. And as you can see in our Actions pane, there is an Outlook tab. If we expand it, we can see our available options. Our first step would be to launch Outlook. So you can either double click on it or drag and drop. Here we will be presented with the variables this produces, and you can change the name. I will keep it as Outlook Instance and hit Save. If you click on the three dots and hit Edit, you can also edit it this way. Next, we are going to retrieve email messages from Outlook. Our Outlook instance will be the name we specified in our launch. Accounts will be the email address of the inbox we are searching. Mail folder will be inbox. There are several options under retrieve. We want all email messages. We can leave the mark as read option enabled. Our only requirement is that the subject contains daily report, so fill that in. And our attachments, we want to save attachments and specify the directory that we want to save them into. And hit save. We then will want to close Outlook and specify the name of our Outlook instance, which is already filled in. Okay, let's run this and see what it does. Okay, we got this error message, failed to launch. That's because Outlook is open. Let's close Outlook and run it again. Okay, that got our targeted emails and downloaded all 6 attachments. Great. Okay, now we need to loop over all our downloaded email attachments and create a folder that identifies the sender, then move the email into that folder. First thing, let's expand loops and see our options. Let's go to a regular loop. Now, we can start from a variable or manual entry. So let's start from the number 1. Now, when we want to go over the same number of our targeted emails. Unfortunately, there's a built-in variable for this. Click the X and expand retrieve emails, and you will see a count variable. This will give us the number of emails we targeted. Okay, great. And over each iteration of emails, we will increment by 1. This will be stored in our loop index variable. Hit save. Okay, so we have our loop that will loop over all our emails. Now, we want to create a folder that belongs to the sender. So expand folder, and we have an option to create a folder. Put that between our loop and enter the location of where you want the folder to be created. I have an attachments directory that I want the folders in. The folder name will come from a variable, but how do we get the sender's name? Over on the right here, if you select more actions and view to retrieve emails, you will see more variables. Click on more on one of the emails. You will see a from set selection. So the format to get the sender will be retrieved emails bracket the index of the email, which will be our loop index, and from. So it will look like this. We are using loop index -1 because we are starting counting from 1, but the index starts from 0, so we have to take that into consideration. Our variable will be produced in a new folder. Okay, but we only want to create the folder if it doesn't exist already. So let's add a check that checks if the folder exists, and if not, create the folder. Let's drag over if folder exists options and change exists to doesn't exist. And the folder path will be our same variable as before. So only if the folder doesn't already exist will we create it. And make sure the create folder is between the folder exists option and its end. We want to move attachment files, so let's look at our variables again. Okay, so there's a variable to get the full name, which is full name, and also just the name of the attachment. Let's use the full name. But as you can see here, noted by the 0, there can be multiple attachments, and we specify each attachment by number. So let's create a loop first to loop over all the attachments that are associated with a given email. Let's go a loop condition and start our first operand at 0. It should go for just as many attachments as the associated email has. Unfortunately, there is no way to get the count of attachments from our variables, but there is another way. If we hit cancel here and go to our loops, let's create a for each loop here. We will use this to count over all our attachments and store it in a variable. We will go over all our attachments that we can get from this variable, and that will output to our current item variable. We just need a count of attachments for an email. So let's add the attachments to a list and then count our list. So let's create a new list and add it outside our loop because we can just clear it with each iteration. Next, create a for each loop and add the attachments to the list we just created. This will get our current attachments. Our item to add will be our same variable, and our list will be the newly created list. And right before the end of our loop, we will clear the list. Now our list variable will have a built-in count variable that we will reference that we can use to loop over our attachments associated with that email. Now, we create a loop to loop over all our attachments associated with an email to move those specific attachments. First thing we want to do is to declare a variable that we will use to increment up to the same count of items listed in our list. So let's declare a variable and call it I. Set its value to 0. Then let's create another loop that will start from I and go to the count of the elements in our list, which will be our number of attachments. So our first operand was going to be I. The operator will be less than because we are starting at 0. And our second operand will be our list count. Save that. Now we want to move our attachment files from our downloaded directory to the associated senders folder. So add our move files action. Our files to move will be set to our directory plus the name of the current attachment variable, with I being our variable to identify the attachments. The destination folder will be our directory plus our senders from identifier variable. And if the file exists, let's overwrite it. Save that. Okay, so we're looping over our attachments to move them using I, but we will have to tell I to increase by 1 after it moves a file. So let's add an increment for I. After our move, set our variable to I and increase by 1. So that should loop over and move our attachments the same number of times as the amount of attachments. Now, after we have moved all our attachments, we want to move the email to indicate we have already downloaded the attachments. So let's add a process email action after our loop. Our instance is set. Our account will be the email address of the inbox. Our email messages to process will be our current email message variable. The operation would be to move email messages, and the mail folder would be a completed folder under our inbox. Okay, let's go over this logic. Our first step is to launch Outlook. Our second step is to retrieve our targeted emails that have certain subject and download those emails into our temp directory. Then we create a list. Then we loop over all those emails associated with the attachments we downloaded. We then create a folder associated with the sender if it doesn't exist. If it does, we skip this. Then, after each attachment associated with that email, we add it to our list. We do this to get the count of attachments because there's not a built-in way to get attachment count. Then we set our variable I to 0 and loop over from I to our list count. We move our associated attachments to a senders folder in our directory. Once we move over all our associated attachments, we move the email to a completed folder and clear our list. And we do the same steps for the remainder of the emails. Then we close Outlook. Okay, in theory that looks good. Let's run it and see what happens. Our Outlook shows 5 emails that should be targeted, 3 different senders with one containing 2 uh, different attachments. And our directory is clear of folders and attachments. Okay, close Outlook and run the flow and let's see what happens. Okay, it completed with no errors. Let's check our directory. We have 3 folders and attachments in each. Great. Let's check our Outlook. And in our completed folder, we have our 5 targeted emails. Great, that works. Okay, that brings us to the conclusion of this video. Hopefully you found it useful. If you have any specific use cases that you would like to see a video for using Power Automate, let me know in the comment section. Please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. This has been brought to you by AIP Solutions.